Hey, what's up, guys? This is Grayson, the Dean 221 Nichols, and I'm here with one of my students, Mike Ender, and we're going over his recent victory from, I believe it's the Thursday, it was a Thursday Thrill, I think, the KO. So
Yep.
I'll hand it to Mike to talk about his recent win in our this week's episode of High Stakes Hand Review. Mike, congratulations on the win, buddy.
Thanks, man. Thanks, man. Hi, guys. So this is the Thursday thrill of New Year's Eve, actually. So it's the first Thursday thrill of 2021, and I won it, so it's nice. This is a hand from the last two tables. So the Thursday thrill is a 109 buy-in tournament with bounty, so it's a progressive bounty builder. And we have Queen 10 here in the big blinds. We have a very big stack. We're doing pretty well. We have more than 100 big blind. The table is a bit, we see that we have three big stacks and two mid stacks and one very small. We can see the bounties from here, but there's also bounties involved as well. So I'm in the big blinds, and we're going to see what happens. And the button, the cutoff, sorry, opens here. I have like notes on him. He's a good player, so I know he's strong. And I know he's a strong player. He opens, small blind folds, big blind call, and I defend here and I up to call here.
Yep,
And
it's pretty standard. And I think obviously, like you said, we know that the cutoffs are regular, so you should have a pretty wide opening range here. Anything
true.
from ace two suited plus, maybe ace five off plus, any suited broadways, maybe all offsuit broadways as well. So yeah, I think we could put him on a pretty wide range opening from the cutoff
Pretty
with
wide.
that stack here.
Yeah. And the flop comes Queen 6 Jack with two spades. The small blind checks. I think I check as well, which I think it's the right thing to do here.
Yep, check.
And the opener bets here, and he bets 70% of the pot.
Yeah, so the first thing that jumps off the page, obviously, is his strange bet sizing. Typically, when we check in this spot, we expect the opponent to bet somewhere around half pot, and I think that's a good rule of thumb anytime you check to the person who raised preflop or just a person on the button in general. If you check to them, you should expect them to typically bet around half pot and have a plan for that. Here, he obviously went bigger, so it's okay to not have an exact plan for this, but I do think it's a pretty clear-cut call and then see what happens on the turn.
Sorry, continue.
No, go ahead.
So the small blind folds, like you say, I think it's a clear-cut call, so I call, and the turn comes another spade.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning really fast too. Like if we were to, I think it's important always be ranging your opponents, when you're going through these spots, right? So on the flop, if we had to loosely give him a range, I would say something like maybe aces, kings, ace queen, king queen, ace king with a spade, exactly, ace 10, 9 10, both of which we do block with a 10. Maybe some odd spade combos, whether it's ace x of spades or 9 7, 8 9 of spades. Granted, something you and I have talked about ad nauseum is how it is strange that people tend to raise with suited cards and then check back on the flop instead of c-betting with them. So I'm not positive he'd bet his spades here, judging how a lot of people tend to do that, but it is a possibility, right? So that's kind of roughly where I'd put his range on. And then maybe, I think he might check back with a jack, like an ace jack, king jack, jack 10 might check back. Maybe ace jack bets, but I'd expect king jack and jack 10 to check back a fair amount. So I think that's like roughly what I would put his range on. Obviously, we're going to adjust that as we move along, but that's kind of like my first glance, what I would think he has after his bet.
Okay. So I call. So I check again. And he bets again very big, 70% of the pot, so 50K on a 65K pot. And this is where it becomes a little bit difficult for me. I like Grace said, his range. If he had the spades, he hit the spades. If he had all his other hands, he's still beating me here. And I don't see him doing that now with like ace jack. Right, he's not gonna, like when you said that he could have bet with ace jack, he will not continue betting with ace jack. He will continue betting his big hands for protection, like aces, kings without spade. He will continue betting a lot of his strong hands actually here, and he's betting again very big, right?
Yeah.
Which is also something to note, I guess.
I think the ones I'd expect us to still be betting would probably be like ace king, ace 10, 9, 10, all with a naked
With a
spade.
spade.
Yeah,
With a
that's
spade.
it. That's it. So it's like, even if that is, we agree that that's enough to make the call, which I don't think it is enough. Well, the problem now becomes that if we do call and then the river's like the 7 of hearts, 8 of clubs, we're going to have to check and call a bet from him.
Yeah.
And I don't love that either. So I think that's something important here. You got to think to yourself, all right, if I do call here, it is under the notion that he is bluffing with, he is semi bluffing at this point with a number of hands that we just mentioned, right? So that means that if we fade a spade on the river or like an ace, or a 9, then that means that we're going to have to stack off. Well, not stack off,
Yeah.
excuse me, but we're going to have to check and call a large bet from him again.
Perfect.
What I
Perfect.
see people do a lot in these spots, and I'll tell you, my first inclination when I saw this spot was just fold here, right? And like, I get it, there are times we will be folding the best hand occasionally, but to me, it's not just calling 50,000 here. It's going to be calling another 100, 120 on the river if the river is a blank. Like, again, and I'm talking like if the river is 9 or lower, that is not a spade, you're going to have to check call all of those cards if you're check calling here, right? And I just
Mhm.
don't love that. And I'm also recognizing that probably 3 out of 10 rivers, spade, ace, stuff like that, maybe a jack, we check fold a lot of those, right? So
I think you're totally right, and when you think it through, you will never be happy to call the river apart if you binge a queen that is not a spade, right? And and most of the rivers will already anyways be bad for you. And when it's going to be like the random card that comes and it's going to bet on 120K, you're not going to be actually happy to call. And like you said, this 50K represents another bet on the river most of the time. So I think I made a mistake here by calling. I decided to call. And actually, the best card that I want, like a 4, is a perfect card for me. I'm happy that it's there, and I check. The opener bets again very big, and I decide to fold. If really if I had seen it through from the turn, then I wouldn't have played it this way, right? Because if I really decided to call the turn, I should actually be calling the river here. But then I went back in my head and I was like, okay, I might have made a mistake by calling the turn, and I don't want to call this river anymore.
yeah, you're
Um,
afraid of the compounding mistake. I get that.
exactly, exactly. I was like, it's not like if really I had a good logic, I should have called that, but it's just I made already a mistake on the turn. So yeah, like you said, I didn't want to compound my mistake, and for me that was enough. So I decided to fold here.
Yeah, and I think again, it's either route kind of makes sense. Like if you call on the turn, I believe you need to call on rivers like this, right? But I
Totally.
don't love this, therefore I might just make the fold on the turn beforehand.
Mhm. Exactly, exactly.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a really cool spot. That's a tough one. I get it. I think the thing that I run into a lot with my students, and I'll see this even sometimes with a pre-flop spot where a student opens something I might not, and then they check the flop. Like,
Mhm.
I think you need to see these things 1 or 2 steps ahead of time. And
100%.
if you're going to engage in this spot, it deserves a particular follow-up action that coincides with what you chose
Mhm.
here. And to me,
Exactly.
since I'm 1 step ahead, I'm realizing I'm just not wild about what's going to follow that. So
Mhm.
I'm just going to escape altogether. And assuming I don't have some really savvy opponent who is just like incredibly bluff heavy in this spot, then I don't really think the population is going to be able to exploit us folding in this spot. But it is important. Know your opponents. If your opponents are super bluff happy, call down a bit wider. And then if they're not, get out
But
earlier,
I
you
think
know?
you said something very important at the beginning of the tournament that's also important to remember is the sizing, right? Like the fact that like he's betting big on the flop, he's betting big on the turn. So for me, like you said, usually, like the flop would be like half pot. So here for me it's someone who wants my chip. Like he wants a lot of chips. He wants to build a pot.
Yeah.
And I think at one point this queen is just not good anymore.
Yeah.
So I think the fold the fold is on the turn. Yeah, I think the fold has to happen on the turn, especially also when the turn comes a spade, and it's like it's part of his range as well to have these spades. And he will continue with so many of his hands on this turn. So
There's
I
just not a
think,
ton of semi bluffs anymore on the turn, other than
no,
ace king and ace 10. Really, that's kind of
exactly.
it.
These are the only bluffs.
That's tough. Yeah, I get it,
Yeah,
man. And like I said, I don't think it's necessarily bad to call turn. Just make sure you call the river afterward.
exactly. That's why I wanted to show this one, is like to say how you can screw up the turn. But what I wanted to say as well is you don't have to call the river if you recognize you made a mistake and you're not in your game plan anymore. You can actually move out of your game plan and realize, oh, I made a mistake, and you don't need to lose this 100K more. So that's how I thought.
But that, I mean, I like what
Yeah,
you're saying to avoid spots before you get
yeah.
too far down the rabbit hole. But at the same time, if you find yourself on this river, even though it's technically kind of a mistake to get there, you need
You
to
think I
call
have to?
here to coincide with the turn action. I think
So
what
you think
happens
I?
a lot is people become very tactile, and they're like, I have top pair, I must call. But you need to
Mhm.
think of it through the range of what he's betting with. So it's like, if he has bluffs, that's why you call down with the top pair. So if we're calling with our queen 10 on the turn, it's because we recognize that he has ace king, ace 10, 9-10, black nines, black eights, stuff like that as semi bluffs. So if we're calling assuming that, and then the river is a blank, well, we would have to call again because nothing has
100%.
changed
But
from
if
the turn,
we
right?
but if we review our assumption and we realize that we might have been wrong on the turn, then I still believe you can still change the way you saw things, right? You might have
Yeah.
thought he had this type of range and it would be a good call, but then when you look at it back, you say, okay, maybe I overcalled there and I shouldn't have.
Yeah, I mean, it just takes you back to folding the first time. You know what I'm saying? So it's like
100%. That's what I'm saying.
it's
I
tough
think
to
it's
say how do
important.
you handle a mistake after we've made it, but I think that to me more that it's not a huge mistake to call turn just as long as you call the river. Like this I'm saying, like if you called this river, I think it's ballsy and thin, but I think it's okay because it followed what you did on the turn. However, I believe you folding here is wrong based on what you did on the turn. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I agree with that. I agree with that. I agree 100% with that.
But I also like where you're coming from when it's compounding mistakes. It's important to be able to escape, and to not bury yourself. But I think that's why it's really important to just be 2 steps ahead so you don't have to get in those spots in the first
Hundred
place.
percent, 100%. But again, the mistake goes there, and I see it more like it's a sunk cost, right? What I've spent, I've already spent, and I still believe that I'm like there's a big chance I'm going to lose the hand. And again, the flow of the tournament and where you are at in the tournament, because we are 2 tables left. Also, like my chips are very valuable. So I totally understand what you mean. And as played, then I should call the river. But I just, yeah, for me, just didn't feel right anymore. So,
Yeah, and
but
I think
again,
that's the thing. I think what I want to see from you in the future would be when you're facing that 50K bet on the turn, just be like, okay, if I'm calling here, it's because I believe he's semi bluffing. So if he's
100%.
semi bluffing, that means I'm gonna have to call on brick rivers, right? And then so have an idea of his range in your head, and then just know what you're, willing to call on the river. So think to yourself what a brick river looks like, and if you feel cool calling, and if you don't feel good check calling on that brick river, that means we just check fold the turn, right?
Exactly. I just gave him too much. Like I didn't look enough at his range. I gave him too many bluffs and too many other hands without thinking it through enough, actually, and that's
Yeah,
my mistake.
and honestly, I think you made a good fold on the river. Like I think he had his beat here a lot. I just
I
think you could have folded one street earlier.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I could have
So
had 50,000 more now. That's the difference. But
yeah,
I won the tournament, so I'm
you did.
happy.
Yeah, all is well that ends well, right? So congratulations on the
Thank
win.
you.
Awesome hand. I hope you guys enjoyed the review this week. Check out our YouTube channel at Elite Rounders for next week's episode. All right, guys, take it easy. Good luck on the felt, everyone. Congrats,
Guys.
Mike.
Bye. Bye, bye, man.